whatever. It's a velociraptor. Fuck off.
Wait, I just realized Kalendor from Wheel of Time is the Holy Grail, right? Because
Oh my God.
it's a perforated chalice, which is a colander, and a colander is Kalendor.
Wow.
And so Kalendor is the Holy Grail.
It is less on the nose than being the sword and the stone.
That's a bad pun, but you know.
Can you tell we've been podcasting for hours? We're getting punch drunk.
You got to cut that one into a Wheel of Time episode.
Oh my
Just
God,
start an
right?
episode with it.
Totally.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
So we're here for a very fun doubleheader today.
Yeah, we're doing it. It's 2 chapters, but this is Aviendha's dream sequence through I should call it dream sequence, but her visions through the crystal Terangrial.
The first of the new visions.
The first of the new visions.
Right. If we assume that this is a permanent sea change in how the columns work, this is the moment of that change.
So near Avendesora and Court of the Sun are the 2 chapters. Court of the Sun's an interesting chapter title. I think that'll be, because that's referencing a post last battle group.
Yeah. And as we were saying before we turned recording on, we're going to do this in traditional What Spoilers reverse order, where we work through it chronologically across the 2 chapters rather than in the order that the author gave it to us, because we are little rebels and we have to be original.
I just think it helps to understand what's going on when you go in a chronological order. It feels like you know what's going on backwards, but it's like turning a painting upside down. It kind of help you see the flaws and see like where the connections are being made and everything like that. So
Helps you see the spoilers.
Exactly. So we're going to do the initial, like her going, obviously her approaching the columns. We're going to do that and then jump to the end of the second chapter and then start working our way backwards through the vision. So it'll be vision, how Aviendha reacts to it, jump back.
Yeah. And then at the very end, obviously, we'll do the actual readout where she, gets out of the columns and is like, whoa, okay, anyway.
Yeah, okay, I got to change some shit. And yeah, I feel like there's just a bunch of philosophical questions around this in terms of like, what does this vision mean? How real is it? What does it have to do with like, obviously she's able to change some things, right? Because the Aiel are in the Dragon of the Peace in the real world and not in her vision. So like, for me, it's pretty, I think I know what's going on, but I've definitely had arguments where I've heard other people argue that this is what's really going to happen. And I think probably going up to her vision, this was what was going to happen.
Yeah, that is definitely my impression, is that this is what's going to happen unless you change something. And because we know that the Aiel do get written into the Dragon's Peace, we know that this is not set in stone. We know it is malleable. But I don't think that it's one of an infinity of variations. I think it's what was going to happen.
I agree. I think it's as true as Min's visions, except that these can change, whereas Min's visions can't.
Right. Well, because Min's not getting a total vision, right? She's getting this tiny little summary of a summary of a summary, whereas Aviendha's getting a much more thorough view.
It really leads to interesting questions around how deterministic is the pattern, right? Because if Min can have these visions that are always going to come true, and Aviendha can have these visions that she can absolutely change, how do you reconcile those two things? Do you have these like anchor points that are unchangeable, but around them you can change a bunch of other stuff? Like it just adds a lot of very interesting questions around the Wheel of Time universe.
I mean, if we go with like kind of the foundation logic, then yeah, most things are very, very flexible and open, and other things are absolutely determined, because if you go at a big enough scale, you can predict what's going to happen.
Right.
So
right.
Maybe this kind of works on a similar principle of like, there's just 3 things ever that are actually fixed, and everything else is a falling degree of probability from that or something.
I was thinking that the kind of visions that the prophecies are things that are true on every cycle, and so you know them because you know history, and you can predict the future because you know history, right? The dragon will arise every time. Like, there's a lot, his blood will be shed on the rocks of Sheol. That's already happened. You know it's going to happen. And then there's other things that are actual magical visions of the future given to you by the pattern or by these columns, right? And those feel, or by, like, Min has a connection to the pattern. And those feel like they're actually foretelling the future in a way that knowing what happened in the past still has the opportunity to vary.
Yeah. And yeah, I agree with Vuji that the columns in the future are going to kind of be a warning thing for the Aiel of like, hey, there's this big road bump, there's this big cliff, there's this big fork in the road coming up, and you need to think about what you want to change in order to avoid that. Like, that's kind of what I imagine the columns are going to be moving forward, because the Aiel used to need to remember where they came from, and as you know, she talked about with Nakomi, like that kind of is passing in the rear view now. So what can the columns do? Help you remember where not to go, I guess.
I kind of think of it like a grad school project, right? Like, it's the point of grad school or getting your PhD is to investigate something that nobody else has ever looked at before. And I feel like the columns are being like, all right, so your grad project now is to solve a problem that no one's ever encountered before.
Yeah, totally. You're in a unique situation. You will have unique outcomes. Here's a warning about how to maybe try to avoid 1 or 2 pitfalls.
And I guess we should revisit Nakomi, as Spadoinkle is asking, because this vision, this change, is absolutely inspired by her conversation with Nakomi, right?
Yes.
And I want to talk about it a little bit more when we get into what the columns are and when she has that connection with the columns, right? But, like, to me, it feels like these are the actions of the creator. That somehow Nakomi, because, like, you know, we decided based on the word of Sanderson, right? Nakomi was the last of the Gen-Aiel who was inhabited as an avatar of the creator, right? That's the final, you know, said by Sanderson, and it fits most of the evidence. She's obviously one of the last Aiel, Gen-Aiel.
Right. I think she's a time traveler. Sanderson says she's just from a, you know, tribe of people who somehow didn't inbreed for the last 3,000 years.
Right.
Reasonable people can disagree,
right.
But whatever.
Yeah, I want to say she was trapped in the dream world of Ruidian for all that time.
Yeah, she was stuck in the fog, like mists around a magical island style. Like she was not just living like a real person, Sanderson.
Right.
Whatever. Anyway.
So she's the avatar of the creator, and she is poking the pattern a little bit to get the Aiel on a better path.
Yeah, just a little nudge, just a little thought experiment that leads to a different set of decisions. Because as we see in the visions, like, and as we've, you know, seen in Rand's visions, this kind of large cultural trend and massive patterns, they do ultimately come from small decisions. It is small decisions that add up to these big things, right? The butterfly effect is very much in evidence in these sorts of progressions. And so the way you think about a problem walking up to it may have very profound implications for 3 centuries later.
And to me, that has everything to do with the way Jordan attacks information over time and space, right? It changes over time and space. Those changes lead to other changes, which lead to outcomes. And that's sort of that. It's a combination of, like, he's investigating with these stories how information alters and changes, legends fade to myth, that sort of thing. And that is applying here as well.
Yeah, totally. Which then also, you know, kind of gets us around the concept of the paradox of time travel, right? If you know about something from the future and you change it, then doesn't that make it real? Like, if it's more about choice and agency than it is about the facts of what happens, then that sort of just lets us sidestep causality paradoxes.
Also, the cycle means, like, not every cycle has to be exactly the same. So you can make different choices and they kind of incorporate into the cycle. And yes, that cycle might be slightly different on this round. That doesn't mean there's a paradox.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Or your prophecy might be slightly wrong, and that's the details might be weird. Or, you know, he who follows after then this cycle might be completely insignificant.
But it could have been significant in a slightly different turning.
Exactly. And that's why it's a prophecy, because sometimes it matters. And that's why you have all these prophecies about some significant things and some insignificant things.
Yeah, exactly. So with that, should I read us into this mess of a chapter set we're going to do?
Yes, please.
Chapter 48, near Avendesora, and our symbol is the Aiel, spears and buckler. Aviendha took one final step and was out of the forest of glass pillars. She took a deep breath, then glanced back at the path she had taken. The central plaza of Ruidian was an awe-inspiring sight. Smooth white flagstones carpeted the entire square, save for the absolute center. There stood an enormous tree, branches spread wide like arms reaching to embrace the sun. The massive tree had a perfection she could not explain. It had a natural symmetry, no missing branches, no gaping holes in its leafy upper reaches. It was particularly impressive since, when last she'd seen it, it had been blackened and burned. And she goes on for a while describing the plaza of Ruidian and what it looks like and what's going on there, but I think that's a good read-in.
Yeah, I mean, just the things that are left are the columns, the rings, the tree. I think that's it, right?
Yeah, that's it, because Moraine took away a huge amount of the Terran and the people living in Ruidian now have squirreled away the rest of it somewhere less public. It's less of just a yard sale of Terran, and now it's like a clean public square. And she says that when she first showed up, they were like doing yard work, essentially, like removing fallen branches and leaves from the tree. And they all cleared out when they saw her. But yeah, this place looks very different from when Rand and all the other chiefs have wandered through.
And Avendesora healing itself, basically. I mean,
really fast. Magically fast.
Feels like there's some link with the dragon there.
Yeah, and maybe also that it's a little bit out of time and place, too, which, again, Nakomi, I think, is, out of time and place, not just out of place. But yeah, if there was ever a tree that represents Rand's connection to the land, it would be literal Avendesora. Also, yeah, it is the magically gene-altered tree from the Age of Legends, right? This is a sprouted sapling clone.
Chora tree.
Yeah, it's a Chora tree. It's just one of many Chora trees. It's like if you took, one of those awful trees that are all blooming in town right now and, took a branch of one away and then people are like, wow, it's so amazing how it stinks like garbage. It's so special. It's like, yeah, this used to just be on a random street in a college town. This is nothing special.
My entire street is lined with those because it was...
what are they called? Why can't I remember what they're called?
Not dogwood.
Hawthorne? Bradley pears.
Bradford, not
Bradford
Bradley.
pears. Yeah.
Which they don't produce any pears. I don't know why they call them that.
No, they just smell like hot garbage.
Yeah, right now, specifically.
Specifically, yes.
No, most of my yard maintenance is just, it's also a very dirty tree. It sheds a lot of flowers and its petals, and it's a lot of stuff coming off that tree.
Yeah, how anyone thought that was a good tree for urban infrastructure, I will never understand.
No, yeah, but my whole street's lined with them. So, and is it better to have a tree that provides shade in my front yard than not have a tree? Yes, absolutely. Am I happy it's a Bradford pear? No.
Are there like literally a bajillion other trees that could have been chosen
exactly.
for that purpose?
Exactly, but it's not like I can regrow a 20-year-old tree overnight.
Yeah. So I think the point of all this is that we're going to headcanon that Avendesora might look beautiful, but it smells like a Bradford pear.
Yeah. No, it smells like a magnolia combined with the honeysuckle and jasmine.
Fine.
That's my headcanon. So yeah, and she thinks about how the glass pillars, like no one else has gone through them since Rand, essentially, right?
Yeah, I feel like there's very strong evidence here to suggest that she is the first wise one to come since Rand exploded everything.
Which seems weird, but like the Shido wouldn't have sent any. Like she goes through the logic, and the logic makes sense.
Yeah, it seems a little bit weird to us just timeline-wise, but the evidence on the page is that no one has come. It's just they've been busy. They've just been busy.
They've been in the wetlands.
The only apprentice that needs to be rushed through this process.
Yeah, it didn't. Yeah, no, they later say they send somebody who's almost ready just to check out if Aviendha's visions.
No, they suggest that, and then I think Amis, one of the wise ones, says, no, I'm going to go next.
Oh, okay.
Because, Aviendha's special and excellent, and we should actually send a real wise one through before we just start hurling around into there, because they can't all be Aviendha. It wasn't Amis, because she wasn't a channeler. Okay, well, one of the wise ones that she tells it to, they suggest, there's this other woman who's about ready, and then one of the wise ones is like, nah, I gotta throw myself on that grenade first. Bear. Yeah. But yeah, Aviendha comes out of this experience being disappointed because she knew what was coming.
Right.
Already. She's having this kind of weird, empty letdown of like, yes, that was an interesting history lesson. It was good to learn how the transition actually happened as opposed to what I thought had happened, but it's not quite the level of emotional trial
Yeah.
that it used to be.
It's not revealing anything that she doesn't already know. It's not even that necessarily that relevant to the Aiel's current, it's like, this is essentially saying you must fight in the waste for generations in order to be ready for the last battle. She's like, yeah, we're fighting the last battle. Anyway, like this.
Yeah, like it's good to fill in the details, but it doesn't really change her sense of purpose, right? Because that's what this is supposed to be, right? It's supposed to galvanize the leaders to lead their people well. This isn't doing that for her. She's not galvanized.
So then we sort of I feel like the next thing to really talk about is sort of the origins of the columns.
Okay, yeah.
Right, because she says it couldn't have been created specifically for the Aiel, could they? And I think they absolutely were, right? I think these were created, we go back to that first vision where the wise ones are saying you have to learn about your history.
Yeah.
I think they were absolutely created in that moment for the Aiel.
Well, and it makes no sense to imagine that they were like transported from elsewhere, right? It makes much more sense to imagine that they were created here on site for this purpose. Maybe the technology, the knowledge of this kind of ter'angreal existed from elsewhere, It's like this is not the only time that glass columns have been used for ancestral memory, but like this set was crafted for the Aiel, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the question is, how were they crafted? Because these, right, we know how ter'angreal are crafted.
Right. You have a seed template, you throw a bunch of power into it, you sleep hard for 3 weeks, you have a new toy.
No, that's Angreal.
Oh, right. I forget. The process is different.
So it's funny enough, Angreal are created by ter'angreal were first. You use ter'angreal to create Angreal.
Right.
Right. The seed ter'angreal is used to create Angreal. But ter'angreal are created by, imbuing an object with power. The one power.
Right.
And yet these seem to be more potent than any ter'angreal she had handled with Lane. Indeed, the pillars seemed alive somehow. I have to wonder if somehow lives weren't put into these columns.
Take 100 volunteers and transform them into sentient computer chips for this processor.
What if the objects that were imbued with the power weren't objects but were people?
I mean, maybe.
It's rough. Like, can you think of the gen? And also, right, that would explain where Nakomi's been.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
if she was part of these columns.
Maybe Rand managed to break one column and let the magic smoke out, and that was Nakomi.
Yeah. But yeah, no, where the gen went, right? Like that's the lost tribe, right? Like you don't have that many left, and you imbue the ancestral memory of your people in, and that's maybe why you need to be genetically related to them. That's for it to work.
Yeah.
That's why you have to be genetically Aiel to go through the columns, because you have to be related to the people who became the columns.
Yeah, and I could see that some sort of, grand last gesture kind of thing. Like we're all going to die out slowly, or we can all go out in a, blaze of magical glory that serves our descendants for the next 2,500 years so that they can save the world.
Exactly. Right, you can see a wise one having a prophecy that the gen will die or they will disappear from the world, and so yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, even reading the books the first few times, I remember having that kind of thought. Like, what if the loss of the last of the gen is connected to the creation of the columns? Like, I'm pretty sure that I was contemplating that, like, in my early reads of the books. Like, there's two things that fit really well together, right? It's like South America and Africa. You're like, do these things go together? Because there's a whole bunch of lost people, and there's a bunch of mysterious columns where the lost people were. Maybe it would be very like the gen, right? We hear about them sacrificing themselves in the thousands to try to bring insane men back, right? This would be relatively small potatoes to turn into magic glass columns for your descendants.
Right, and let's talk about the other things that were made at the same time as the columns, right? The Eye of the World was made, and we know a bunch of Aes Sedai sacrificed themselves to create that object of power, right? Like, and to hide away the horn and the banner and to create a well of power for Rand, And that's just one thing they're creating for Rand. What if something else they were creating for Rand were the Aiel people?
Yeah. And yes, Vuji, I agree. It does give it a slight Jonestown overtone if you think about it in too much detail. But, like, it's for the creator's greater good. I don't know.
There's something going on with these columns that's beyond normal ter'angreal. They're alive. They're more powerful. Something else is going on with these.
Or is it just because they're really, really big? Is it because they're made out of some sort of thread pulled out of Tel Iran Riyadh? Is it because there's actually a bigger thingy connecting them underground like roots of a tree? I don't know.
Right. And yeah, so this one gave her a chill. Was she touching the pillar or was it touching her? Right. There's this awareness, this life that exists inside the columns in a way that life doesn't exist inside other ter'angreal.
Yeah. It also makes me think of Wrinkle in Time when they go to get her dad and he's stuck in the column like Ariel in the tree in The Tempest, that whole thing. Obviously there's not a single person trapped in the column, but it kind of reminds you of that. Like there's someone in there, there's someone on the other side.
And then there's a transformation that happens, right? That she tries to read the ter'angreal as she's done before. But this one is so vast, it's incomprehensible, like the one power itself, right? So in some way, this column is linked to the one power, linked to the creator, linked to Nakomi again.
A Jen who exists out of time and space. Yeah. And I mean, there's this line too. She was an insect trying to grasp the size and mass of a mountain, which makes me think of Masana throwing herself against the White Tower.
Yes.
And, popping her brain, right? This is a good guy version of that, but it's a similar kind of, these are more than they seem. These have an institutional cosmic power behind them that is belied by their fragile appearance on the outside.
It was as if she felt she had suddenly fallen into a deep, dark pit, and then she snaps her eyes open, pulls away, and the columns are changed.
Yeah. She's flipped some switch. She's input some new code, something. She inserted a new memory card. However it is that this thing works, she's changed it.
You know what I think it is? I think Nakomi used her like a thumb drive. Nakomi interacted with her in the dream, imprinted some code onto her, and then when she went and interacted with the columns and did her little reading the columns thing, that was enough. The columns read back into her, read the code that Nakomi had implanted, and that reconfigured them.
So you're saying this has nothing to do with Aviendha. She was just an information mule.
Absolutely. She was absolutely just a vector for Nakomi to make that change for the Aiel people.
Huh. Maybe. That was what she was always there to do, is like once phase 1 is complete, we need someone left behind to help shift it into phase 2.
Well, that's just fun headcanon. That's probably not what's going on. But yeah, I more feel like Aviendha, basically the column read her situation, read her hopes and dreams, and changed based on the knowledge. But I also feel like it somehow has to be linked to her power to read the ter'angreal.
I mean, maybe that's just what allowed her to make any kind of contact at all. And if she didn't have that ability, she wouldn't have even gotten past the front door.
Or the idea that maybe the ability to read ter'angreal is just the surface level of her skill. Like her interaction with ter'angreal is she's been reading the code this whole time, but it turns out she can write it too.
Yeah, totally. She's not so much in the creating ter'angreal business as in the programming ter'angreal
Exactly.
business. She'd be the kind of person who could put a new book into the fiction and nonfiction ter'angreal. She could actually put new books in there, whereas Elaine could figure out how to make another one.
Sure. One's a computer engineer, one's a software engineer.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that brings us to the actual visions.
Yeah, so with that, we're going to not immediately read the very last of her descendants. We're going to go back to the first of her descendants. The
only thing that I want to say about the first vision is that she turns away from the pillars and takes a step. And the first vision occurs as she steps away from the pillars, and then she walks further away. After that first vision, nothing happens, and she has to walk back into the columns to get the rest of the visions. So it seems like there's this moment where the columns reach out and say, hey, I've got something else for you.
Yeah, it's almost like a little tease. It's like, do you want a free sample? This cheese is on sale.
So again, there's this interesting interaction between Aviendha. It's almost like a conversation where they change what they're going to be doing in the future.
Yeah, it is very much like they're actively in the sandbox playing with the code. It's not fixed in a way. There's a conversation happening. And I wonder if that's what it's going to be like for all future wise ones that go through, is something much more conversational between their hopes and dreams and what the potential future is, or if it's just she had the most access to it, We don't get a lot of insight into what comes after for Wise Ones. I don't know.
But that was a lot of fun speculation about the columns. Like,
Yeah,
because we
yeah.
never get a canon about what they are or how they're connected to Aviendha or why they change.
No, the implication is just that she's so good with the software programming of ter'angreal that she somehow gets in and changes the code, or was just a virus carrying thumb drive from Nakomi.
I mean, I certainly think the idea was implanted by Nakomi, whether or not she's doing it consciously.
Well, it's all about the question, right? Nakomi made Aviendha think.
Exactly.
And that question is what she's carrying in her heart as she's, disappointed by the original visions and thinking about what can the columns do. Like, that's the uppermost question in her mind.
So yeah, in a lot of ways, it does feel like it's implanted by Nakomi, right? Like, even if it was just making Aviendha think about that before she walked into the situation.
So yeah, do we actually want to do which vision do we want to do first? Do you want to do Padra?
Padra, let's jump into the daughter of the Dragon Reborn and the daughter of Aviendha here.
Yeah, which I think is weird to have the vision go all the way to the point of like being in your own daughter's head. Like, that's kind of weird. Like, if it's, your fifth back great grandparent, like, okay, that's distant. But like your daughter, like, this is a person you're going to like have and raise.
Well, probably not.
I don't know. That feels weird. Probably Padra is probably the one whose name she's going to change. Like, no, not that bitch. So yeah, we open with Padra, who is killing some Shanshan, right? They're dealing with a raid on Shanshan. And her first thought is, like, curse the ones who taught the Shanshan traveling.
Elida causing problems even
Elida.
in the future.
Yeah.
But I love even though the weaves weren't very elegant, because they learned them from Elida, who wasn't very elegant at them in the first place. So her incompetence went through the Shanshan.
Yeah, because the Aiel don't think highly of Aes Sedai weaving in general. And Padra and her siblings are like next level savants with the power. So yeah, the poorly translated. Also, I imagine Shanshan weaves aren't very elegant given that they're all forced and coerced and for harm. Like, it's got to be worse than white people dancing, right? There's just no rhythm to it at all.
I've tried. It just doesn't work. I've tried. I've got no rhythm. You were at my wedding, you know.
But, they're savants at channeling, so they're really elegant at it.
Yeah, and do you want to talk about the whole, like, channeling 24/7, even in your sleep, not having any risk to being lost to it? Like, what the fuck is going on there?
There's some Krizak Chadarak bullshit right there.
Is it because they're the son of the dragon? Like, is it because, like... I mean, and we can talk about, are they Rand's children, or are they Rand in Moradin's children?
I mean, I always assumed that they were conceived with that shower scene right before the last battle. So I figured that they were Rands.
But some of them have black hair. And neither Aviendha nor Rand are going to have kids with black hair in their current bodies.
I mean...
And there's 4 of them?
Genetics are weird, but yeah. Yeah, the concept of having quadruplets is perhaps more unbelievable
naturally
than whether or not they have black hair. Spoduncle, they're Tams. This is Tam's black hair. And then, Min did say that there's something weird about them in the vision, but, God, I hate the idea of Aviendha hooking up with the Moradin body. It just gives me the ick.
But it's still Rand.
But it's not. That body was stolen. It's icky.
Maybe he casts Mask of Mirrors so he looks like himself.
Oh, yeah, that makes it so much better.
It's... Yeah, Aviendha having 4 babies, Min saying there's something odd about them, them channeling the one power naturally, it all adds up to something very wonky, and it implies that Rand's genetics are special somehow, or what something he did to himself or his soul is affecting his children somehow.
Maybe, like, they actually got conceived in the dream or something, so they got, like, superpowers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I think it's cool, though, that they all channel the power constantly. Like, I kind of think it's neat that they're like almost this next evolution in what the power can be, right? Because it's, canonical. It's a genetic thing. So it makes sense that you could have a combination of recessive genes coming together to just make a whole new kind of thing. I think it's kind of cool. If they're going to be weird, make them really, really weird. Give them all the weird.
Yeah, Marzipan makes a good point. Like, the power that lets Rand light his pipe appears to also let his children have this meta power around the one power. It's like they can control the one power.
That's a cool idea.
Like, 4 kids, 7 legs. Really weird.
Like, we're just going to name it Sleipnir. It's fine.
I mean, with Matt, they're down an eye, so.
Yeah, really, Matt's the one who should be having the weird kids
right.
if we're going to continue with the... Well, no. No, because he's Odin. Loki's the one that has all the weird kids.
Well, because didn't Loki, he's the shapeshifter, so he can keep changing shape and having sex.
Yeah, Loki is the non-binary chaos monster who's like, I'll just have an 8-legged horse baby and then give it to my brother Odin to be his steed. It'll be great.
Yeah, that does sound a lot more like Matt.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like, I kind of want to be like, oh, it's Matt, but like, no, Matt's Odin. Mm-hmm. So I don't know who the Loki is in this situation.
We don't really have much of a Loki chaos character. Tom, maybe?
Or Fane.
Fane, but Fane's the evil one, right?
That's the thing, is Loki's supposed to be ultimately a good guy, even though he's mostly causing problems for the good guys. Which, again, more like Matt.
Right.
And yeah, Matt is the most roguey, trickstery. And Odin and Loki have a lot of overlap. There's even some interesting scholarship that suggests that Loki's kind of an aftermarket addition to the pantheon who may not have existed before Christian people started inserting themselves into that.
Well, it explains why he's an adopted, ice mountain creature and not part of the original family.
Right. Yeah, totally. So, yeah, if anyone's going to be giving birth to an 8-legged horse, it's going to be Matt.
Would he give birth to it, or would he just impregnate a, tavern wench horse?
Well, Loki's the one giving birth. Again.
He is?
Shape changing. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Loki changes shape quite dramatically.
Shape and gender?
Yeah. Loki's non-binary, man. Loki identifies as a problem.
I guess I'm not up on my Loki lore.
There's a lot of it. He's a very popular character. Yeah, exactly, Fuji. The story goes Loki turns into a mare and gets impregnated while in mare form and thus gives birth to a horse. But the horse has 8 legs because, cosmic weirdness. Mm-hmm. So anyway, back to Padra. They're basically at this Aiel city that isn't a city. It's just a camp that's been there for decades. So it's not a city, but, And there's this... The Aiel have changed in ways that Aviendha would clearly find very disappointing, like already in one generation.
We're always disappointed with our children.
Well, yeah. But, they're living in essentially a city. They've got this weird, almost like noble class of the dragon's lineage. They're fighting as though fighting itself is honor, right? There's a lot about Padra and Oncala where you see the erosion of the concepts that Ji Ito is built on, just getting like compressed further and further and further. It's kind of like a 1984 like progression of Moby Dick, right? Like first you simplify the words and then you start turning them into symbols, and then pretty soon it's just like a single line of emoji, and that's Moby Dick, right? That's it. And you kind of see Ji Ito going through that process, right? Like the concept that touching an enemy and capturing him without hurting him is the most honor. Like that has completely gone by the wayside already in Padra's generation. It's totally gone by Oncala's generation.
Because that takes skill, and you have to have doing that comes from a place of privilege and being able to capture them without having your civilization destroyed. And they're beyond that point. They're in a civilization-ending conflict with the Shan-Chan, and that's really the central theme of these visions going forward. Is we're seeing the decision to fight the Shan-Chan is destroying the Aiel people.
Yeah. Because, they were left out of the Dragon's Peace. They're trying to find their way into this, ostensibly more or less watertight system, and there is no crack for them to come in.
And on top of that, because there is no enforcement mechanism of the Dragon's Peace, all the other nations are fracturing and falling apart and not providing a unified front to the Shan-Chan, leaving the Aiel to fight on their own.
Right. And yeah, to your point about the honor thing, like the Shan-Chan make terrible prisoners, right? They talk about it. Like Shan-Chan make horrible guys shine. There's no point at all. It's kind of like Aiel make terrible Dako Vale, right? Both sides don't play by the rules of engagement that the other recognizes. And so, yeah, there can be only one, right? This world is not big enough for the two of these powers. And yeah, the Aiel don't want to take over the world, but the Shan-Chan do. And so that still puts them into existential conflict.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I really do think there is this moment where the Shan-Chan could have changed. And that clearly didn't happen in this timeline. Right. They're still living on, she says like, oh, we almost had peace with the old empress, the one who had ruled during the days of the last battle, had been considered a woman of honor. Right. So that's Tuon, right?
An agreement had almost been reached with her. There was almost détente. And then one assumes that there was some sort of massive coup in which her and Matt both died because the palace got, leveled by the power or something.
Right. So, and again, this is just sort of, I'm assuming that in the actual future, this is all going to change because you have the Dragon's Peace enforced by the Aiel.
Right. And even if Tuon and Matt do get completely flattened in an assassination, like the reality of all the political alignments will still play out differently because the Aiel are incorporated, welcomed, understood, accounted for in the Dragon's Peace across the continent.
And we later find out that the Aiel really started to lose the war once the rest of the nations got involved in fighting the Seanchan.
Yeah, then here's this quote that refers to Aviendha. This larger problem, what was it to be ideal now that their duty to the past had been fulfilled? They think that it's starting war with the Seanchan.
Right. They think that's their purpose now. Because if you have no purpose, you got to find one.
Yeah. They have this whole idea that it's going to restore their honor because they've lost their honor to the point that they don't even know what honor is, right, from where Aviendha's sitting.
And a big part of that is their leaders have been wise women who are channelers who have been taken captive by the Seanchan.
Yeah, the Seanchan have had a very long-term plan with how they have approached the pre-war conflicts. Right, we're not even in the war, but yeah. And so then they talk to this old guy who actually saw Rand.
And we've seen him before in other scenes, right? Ronan is not. Let's see. Let me pull him up. Oh, maybe not.
No, because I think he's a kid, right? He says that his father really was the one who told him about Rand and stuff. Like, I don't think Ronan was old enough to technically count as a survivor of the last battle, right?
I mean, he says he remembers Rand visiting Cold Rock's Hold. So he has to be like 10 or so at the time of these books. But you're right. I thought he was mentioned in an earlier chapter. He's not.
Oh, yeah. No, they talked to this guy, Bruon, who had actually lived through the last battle. He was old enough to survive it.
A lot of new names in this section. And I looked them up. None of them appear to be named after fans.
So yeah, they make the decision to initiate war. They don't have a plan for exactly how they're going to do that. But, they have all the Aiel captives as an excuse to initiate war.
Oh, yeah, Ronan's father. So Ronan talks about his father, who is Ruark, right? My father called Rand Althor a clever man and a great leader, but one who did not know what to do with the Aiel. I remember him saying that when the Karakarn was among us, he did not feel like one of us. Which to me, just do Ruark saying that? No, come on.
At the beginning, but then after he spent, months practicing hand-to-hand combat with Ruark and stuff, that... Of all the clan chiefs to have said that, Ruark's the one I believe it of least.
Right, exactly.
Especially because, after the battle, there's no more time for Rand to develop that relationship. That's referring to stuff we've seen already.
Yeah, and it's just no, they don't buy it.
I mean, Rand was kind of uncomfortable with them for a good chunk of that relationship, but not always. Not in the end. In the end, he kind of got it together and made peace with it.
I mean, I get that he doesn't know what to do with them, but that's not making him uncomfortable. It's just the description doesn't match what I know of Ruark.
Yeah, it feels weird. And yeah, they kind of talk briefly about maybe we could just go to the waste, and it's nah, we'll get left out of the world, and the world is coming to us whether we want to or not.
Basically, what ends up happening in the Shido, they go back to the waste and fade to nothing, and eventually die out.
And what happens to these people's descendants because of, what happens. Yeah, to be forced into the waste either by choice or by military might, either way, it's not going to work for the Aiel. They have to stay out of the waste now.
And I feel like we should save Aviendha's reaction till the end So let's go back to the previous POV.
Okay, so now we're going to Padra's daughter. We're only going one generation down.
Oncala,
which is a cool name, for being honest. And this is the most bitchy of all of them. This is the most problematic. Aviendha's granddaughter is the biggest problem in the entire lineage.
Because I feel like you're at this point where, what is it? Businesses only last 3 generations, right? You got the founder, the son who manages it for a while, and then the grandson, children who run it into the ground because they don't appreciate what they've got, and they've been spoiled since they grew up. And this is the grandchild running the Aiel into the ground.
Yeah, and this is the peak of arrogance, right? This is someone who was riding high on, I am the granddaughter of the dragon. I have people carrying a banner around with me. I'm always surrounded by bodyguards. I shouldn't have to be on an equal footing with anyone ever, even my literal cousin, essentially, right? Like the queen that they're going to talk to is essentially her cousin. And she's so angry at the Andorans for needing them, right? Like that's why she hates these people, is because she needs them. Like that is just peak arrogance.
Marzipan makes a good point. We don't actually know if this is like 20 years later or like 120 years later, because channelers can live long enough. You can have like this is the back to like, when do channelers have children? Is it always within the first like 30 years of their life, or do they go on and continue to have children for like 100 years if they want to?
Well, we know that Padra is having her experiences 17 years after the end of the last battle. They say that in that POV. And then with Oncala, it says after decades of war, things have been going the way it is. So,
but 3 decades or, 50 decades, 5 decades, 6 decades, 7 decades. We don't really know how long it's been.
I feel like it can't have been more than 5 decades. I feel like it's more like 3 because of the age of the queen and the fact that they named themselves as being so many generations removed. Now, Talana is a middle-aged woman, and Oncala seems like 25 at best.
Mm-hmm.
And they're great mothers, grandmothers were first sisters. So they're not multiple generations separated. They're both the same number of descendancies. But she's not old enough to have married yet, right? Like, whereas Talana is middle-aged, so.
But there's clearly bad blood between these two lineages of Rand.
Well, at least between these two women. Oncala seems to be holding up the entire feud on her own. But it seems like Aviendha and Elaine's bond has... Also, I gotta wonder where Elaine and Aviendha are.
Right.
Because if we're only, 50 years after the end of the last battle, they should both still be kicking pretty hard.
It's one of the things that's never addressed in these future visions is how long channelers live. He just acts like everyone dies after 80 years or gets old and fades away, when it's like most of our characters should still, like, they survived the last battle, they're channelers, they're powerful. 20 years later, 40 years later, they should be completely unchanged.
Yeah. A little weird.
Like, why is Elaine not the ruler of Andor still?
Oh, it says right here, 40 years of war, and Andor had not been touched. Yeah, so we get a number of decades. There it is. Boom. Yeah.
Right, so 2 generations, right? So it's the very typical average 20 years, then later, then 20 years after that, people are having babies. So, yeah, it's just one of those things that feels like a very easy oversight, that channelers are just not living.
Yeah, I guess they all just fucked off on a yacht and got hit by a random whale.
I mean, even 40 years later, if Elaine was living a normal human lifespan, she should still be 60.
Yeah, and if she was assassinated, that would be like a big important plot turning point in the war kind of thing. I mean, it's like the whole thing that hinges on here is like plans for the assassinations of the heads of state, right? So if Elaine had been assassinated, you think that would have borne mentioning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and even if, like, let's say channeling goes away, but channeling doesn't go away. You clearly have, like, lots of channelers. She's not like, I'm the only one who can channel. She's like, I'm the weird one who can channel by holding the power all the time.
Well, that was her mother even. It's not even, Oncala's not even thinking about that stuff. So I don't even know where she's at with her channeling powers.
Right. The Raven Empire's techniques and skill with shaping the One Power were growing. So, like, clearly the One Power exists and is being used. But yeah, and yes, channeling does have to go away at some point, but I believe that's not this age.
Oh, I think it's the end of the Fourth Age is the loss of power.
Yeah, I think that's how the Fourth Age ends, right? Yeah. But yeah, just a lot of arrogance in her mind. She thinks, why are they my equals? These soft wetlanders. She hates them. There's so many reasons why she hates them, because she needs them. And it's like, what is wrong with you? How did this hatred and bigotry get into your mind?
Again, it's like, did your grandmother not like smack some sense into you when you were talking shit as a child? Like, how has Aviendha not course corrected you? Where is Aviendha in all of this?
Also someone who should still be alive and old. They're not old. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The whole foot mangling thing means that she's probably been kept quite safe because she can't go running around on raids, right? She has to sit in a chair and dispense wisdom. It's weird. And, the Queen of Andor clearly doesn't particularly like the Aiel either. There's a very antagonistic relationship. Like, oh, I assume you're here to beg for aid again. Like, clearly the bad blood is long-standing already.
And here's where the disinformation campaign comes in.
Here's the false flag that's not a false flag.
Yeah, the weapons of mass destruction, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
That's what this feels like to me. Where it's like, we have this information that they're coming to attack you, and it's like, no, they wrote a contingency plan.
Right? They did a war game, and they took notes on the war game. Like, you're allowed to do that as a superpower.
Especially because, you are expecting at some point that this could break down. You're breaking the agreement. So, clearly they were right to keep those plans.
Yeah. And also, we learned that Hayal, the man that she's, probably going to marry at some point, had spent a great deal of time over the last decade seeding the question of how much the Seanchan could be trusted in all the great courts of the world. Of their side of the war. They have been doing a decade-long, not exactly misinformation campaign, but an eroding of trust.
A whisper campaign. Yeah.
A whisper campaign, being like, well, you know that the Seanchan can't be trusted. Everyone says it, right? Hayal has been deliberately making sure that everyone says it, right? He's been injecting this thread into the conversation that is just for the Aiel's propaganda purposes. It does not reflect anything other than how much the Aiel hate the Seanchan. It does not reflect something that the Seanchan actually... We have no evidence that the Seanchan are on the brink of reneging on all of their agreements. Like, maybe not. They don't care.
And it's because the Aiel want backup to attack them and get back the wise ones who've been captured and are being held.
Yeah. Yeah, they feel like they are owed the backup of the nations of the world on this side of the conflict. And Andor and the other nations don't really agree because they don't really know how to interact with the Aiel. They don't feel like they have a relationship or an enforcement codependency or anything. And so they have to be coerced, lied to into this. And so they get given this information that the Seanchan have this complete plan for how to take apart everything, leaving out the page that explains that it was an exercise.
And I believe that the Dragon's Peace avoids all of this, right? Because you have a united front and you have this agreement between the Seanchan about channelers, right? That agreement between Egwene and Tuon, I don't think would have existed without the Dragon's Peace. Even though they kind of make it outside of it, but they make it in the context of the Dragon's Peace.
Yeah, and it means that every time there's a conflict over the next few decades, there's going to be a common mortar through which the conflict gets resolved. There's going to be camaraderie and rapport built between the nations through their Aiel counterparts. And it's just going to be a completely different, more flexible, more resilient political system than this fractured and divided, individualistic, isolationist sort of thing that we're dealing with in these visions.
And so it does seem like that little change in the beginning can actually lead to significant peace over time.
Mm-hmm. Again, it's all about the questions. Yeah, how do you approach the tangled issue? What's your setup?
Approaching it in this order is helping me see just how much the little choices that are being made around the Dragon's Peace is what's leading to this conflict.
Yeah. Oh, and then this is the line where we get the chapter title, right? We're reading from the Court of the Sun. If Andor entered the war, and the other nations would go as well, particularly those in the Pact of the Griffin and those in the Court of the Sun.
So the Pact of the Griffin has to be Andor's allies, and the Court of the Sun has to be Kyrianen's allies?
Yeah, that's what I would imagine, is that if Kyrian is the center of that alliance, then that's where you get that title from. And then, yeah, Pact of the Griffin just has to be everyone else who's not in the Court of the Sun arrangement.
And again, it seems there is a separation between Kyrian and Andor. You don't have Elaine's descendants ruling both.
Yeah, I guess that doesn't work out so well. That unification doesn't work out great. I don't know.
Again, it's just there's a lot of details in this vision that don't apply based on how we know the last battle ends and the agreements around it.
And a lot of it doesn't even seem probable based on what we know of the characters already.
Exactly.
It implies so many weird rocks have been thrown in the pond between the end of the last battle and whenever this is happening.
So to me, this feels like a potential future, but to me, it doesn't necessarily. I know we agreed it was like probably the most likely, but I'm not sure. I think it's almost just like a warning. It's like, what if everything aligned to be bad?
Yeah, maybe.
It's almost a worst possible future type situation.
Yeah. There's a lot of holes in this that, it does make me feel like maybe this isn't the most definitely going to happen. But it is a very present danger that something this problematic would happen, and that's why the visions are warranted.
Right. No, and it's clear that by joining the Dragon's Peace, she steers very far away from this happening.
Yeah, because this is all about the Aiel feeling out of place and excluded and not a part of what is happening.
I mean, and the Shan Chan are still going to be a problem. I think that's where I get stuck on is like this being part of the Dragon's Peace doesn't necessarily solve the Shan Chan problem, but what it does do is give the Aiel allies and creates a unified front against the Shan Chan, while also creating pathways of communication with them to improve the. I mean, I think it has to go back to the fact that I think the Shan Chan society needs to change. You can't have Suldam dominating Dumane, knowing the Suldam can channel if they choose to.
Right, and that's not something that the Dragon's Peace is going to solve. That's something that Shan Chan has to sort for itself. But how resilient can you be while Shan Chan implodes and explodes at the same time? That's what the rest of the world gets to deal with, is how do you handle the fall of a slave empire when it is driving the global economy? I'm sorry, what? Anyway, we're fine. We're fine.
I'm so glad these books have no relevance to current events. I wouldn't want to talk about those.
Oncala thinks that she deserves to rule and that the Dragon Empire is going to come out of this and that she's, paternalistically making decisions for everyone else in the whole world. It's better for the Queen of Antor to enter the war and not know that it was a lie. And it's just peak arrogance. Just peak arrogance. And that's how that POV ends. And Aviendha's reaction is, oh my God, I want to kill that bitch.
Basically, that creature had no honor. She has ruined us. And she realizes that's her granddaughter and is like crying going into the final vision. Yeah.
Yeah. She's like, this is my fault. I literally made this person. So moving back another generation.
And forward and back. I do kind of miss that she doesn't do she took a step forward. And it would be, I wanted to say, it does say Aviendha took a step forward, but with Rand, it was always took a step forward and back. And it would be interesting if you took a step forward and ahead.
And forward and ahead. Yeah, I'm like, forward and forward doesn't sound. Forward and ahead. That would have been good. But she doesn't realize what's happening till like halfway through, so like the rhythm of it would have been lost.
Right.
But that would have been cool. I agree. Yeah, so this next POV is Ladalin, which is the first POV of Chapter 49, Court of the Sun, which has the same symbol as the last chapter, the Aiel, Spears and Bucklers.
Really telling us it should have been one chapter.
Someone in the editorial board was like, no, split it.
So here's where we get to the point where it does feel like most of the channelers have been culled from the Aiel.
Yeah, because we are now with an old woman who is worn down by war. The war of attrition has flashed by in the jump that we just made.
And do we know her relationship to Oncala?
Ooh, where is that? No, they mentioned something about Ladalin's mother, but it doesn't say who the mother was. And she also says, this is our fault, not that of my distant great father. So she sort of blurs how many generations there are. And one of the other guys in the scene says, I refuse to follow the memory of a man my great fathers barely knew. Again, not really specifying how many generations we've got here.
It's interesting because in the Rand generation, I feel like we always have a connection to the previous vision.
There's some pretty gappies. There's some gaps.
There's some gaps? Okay.
Yeah. She mentions that Ladalin's mother had spoken of the days when there had still been Guy Shine.
I feel like that's like the days when we still had enough idle time to have servants, right? Like that's...
Well, the days when they didn't need every hand for the war effort.
Yeah, exactly. They're not all fighting.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of always assumed that it was just one generation per jump, but this could be one or two, maybe. It does suggest it's not that long, though, because she's known the war her whole life, but, like, the war clearly was at a very different point when she was a little girl. and now she's an old woman. So like the war can't have been new when she was born, which would suggest that she is Oncala's. Well, I guess maybe she's not Oncala's daughter. Maybe she's the daughter of one of the other three.
Right.
We don't actually know because there are 4 branches, and she says she's the last of them, that the other 3 branches have all been killed off. We don't actually know that she's Oncala's line. She could be one of the other 3.
Yeah, she had heard stories about her mother and great mother's days, but they seemed incredible, the war. So it implies that there was no war during her mother's day.
Right, and and we know Oncala starts the war as an adult. So, and there's 2 boys and 2 girls of Aviendha's children. So again, it doesn't have to be Oncala. It could be the other daughter. And yeah, she can't channel. Right, we've had Padra who could channel like bonkers, and all 4 of the kids could channel like crazy. And now Ladalin doesn't have that ability.
Mm-hmm. And very few people do, right? The Shanshan really have concentrated on capturing and eliminating those people, she says it. And in this moment, the important thing is the White Tower has fallen, right?
Yes. Big turning point in the war.
Right. This is sort of the moment in which there is no longer a resistance channeling group against. They said the Black Tower still fights, but in exile, because the Black Tower has fallen as well.
In secret, right? Like they are guerrilla fighters, right? They're the resistance. They're the underground.
And the Shanshan had captured Ruidian, which, in the last vision, they said, oh, they'd never do that. That's, would violate essentially, that'd be a war crime, essentially is what they're saying.
Well, that's part of why they justify it, right? They're like, well, they shouldn't have attacked Ruidian. That's what gives us the right to do this, right? In the last vision, the Shanshan attacking Ruidian was seen as a war crime that opens up the can of worms, which we cannot relate to at all at 2:30 on the 7th of April, 2026. We cannot at all empathize with that feeling of they wouldn't do that. That would open up a whole can of worms.
They might close the Strait of... Hold on.
Dragon?
The Dragon Strait? Yeah, the Strait of the Dragon.
The Strait of Tammuz, that goat-kissing pig.
Tammuz!
Yeah,
you
Tammuz.
fool! Nice.
So yeah, this is the council. They're talking about, essentially, do we have to retreat, right? That's what is happening here. We've got, there's less clan chiefs than there used to be. There's less clans than there used to be. There's less wise ones than there's used to be. There's no Gaishain because every single hand is needed for the war effort.
And Gaishain means one... Now Gaishain just means the shameful one. It's not like something you do to get your honor back. It just means you've been shamed.
Yeah, there's no honor to be found. The whole concept of honor is really falling apart, right? They've got the Miagoma has had 3 chiefs in as many years. And yeah, now that Ruidian has not just been attacked, but captured, now they don't know how to raise leaders. And that is going to be a problem, right? Because we know that the Aiel have been held together by the magical rituals that they've accessed in Ruidian for their entire history. So if they literally can't go to Ruidian, who are they as a people, right? They really can't keep the covenant now.
She talks about the wise ones and the dragon-blooded use the one power in battle. I assume dragon-blooded is the male channelers of the Aiel.
Oh, okay. I just thought she meant like all the descendants of the dragon.
But they've all been eliminated except for her. So how could they fight?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so male channelers are dragon-blooded in deference to him who cleansed the male half and all that.
That's what I assume, right?
That
Because
makes
wise
more
ones would be
sense,
the female Aiel channelers, and we don't have any male Aiel channelers right now, in our current, but in the future, they'd have to have a name for them. So I think dragon-blooded is what they call them.
I like it.
And that's why you distinguish between the wise ones and the dragon-blooded.
Sure.
The female and the males.
Yeah. And then we get to part of the heart of why the dragon's peace needs modified, right? One of the wise ones says, we have to go back to the threefold land and seek penance for our sins. What sins? And they're like, well, the dragon wanted peace. The dragon left us, right? Like they were not incorporated into the dragon's peace, and so they're left out. And this one person wants to be all self-blaming. Like, well, we sinned. We have to go back and pay for it again. And like as we talked about with Nakomi, like that's a weird, prideful thing to do. That's not right. That's not what's happening. But like, yeah, how are you supposed to find honor if the dragon left you out of the system, that the new world order that he left behind, right? The dragon made a whole world order and just left you, his most important allies, out of it. Like, where is their honor for you? That's a really valid question.
And the question that Nakomi was asking her, right? She's seeing this question come up in history and be like, oh, this unanswered question is haunting our people and has led us to disaster. The question needs to be answered, which is what use of the Aiel now that they're no longer the Dragon Spear. You know, and what they turn to is the hatred of the Shan-Chan and continued war. And that's just not a solution for them.
Yeah. And then this one chief says that this is Rand's fault. And Ladalin, for some reason, is like, no, it's our fault. And I'm like, I disagree respectfully. Since Aviendha has to tell Rand that he's wrong. I do think it's kind of more Rand's fault than your fault.
I mean, it's one of those things where, like, could the people have made better choices and not gone to war? Right? Oncala's decision to send them to war is kind of their fault.
Sure. They can take responsibility for their actions, but to let Rand off the hook entirely is not.
No. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. He's leaving behind this dangerous group of people with no purpose. Like, they're going to get into trouble. But yeah, he tried to give them the opportunity to determine their own fate without his interference. Because, you know, one of his guilt points was that he felt like this entire generation of people suffered for him for 3,000 years. And he wanted to give them a chance to make their own fate. But
he did that without talking to them about it, which is just the same paternalistic bullshit he thought he was getting away from.
Exactly. And the Aiel have this inherent instinct to serve, right? Their goal is to serve. When they were, you know, Guy Shine like back in the Age of Legends, they served. Whether they're serving the dragon as the way of the spear, they need a purpose and they need someone to serve. Now, we get into the whole aspect of deciding that a people is what are these, house elves, right? Like,
yeah, they're genetically predisposed to serve, and they'll ruin themselves if they're given too much agency. Is a weird argument.
It's a little bit weird. Yeah, it's definitely a patronizing kind of bullshit argument about lots of groups of people that justifies why they're dominated by, you know, Westerners.
Yeah, but there is something to be said for de-radicalizing someone in stages.
Sure.
There is something to be said for not just ripping them away from everything they've ever known and tell them figure it out with no support, no follow-up, no community. Like, this is a big boat. You can't turn it in a single moment. And what this guy says here is that our honor was taken from us. We were crafted to be a spear. He used us, then cast us away. Right? That's the problem. Is it's like you were used for your purpose, and then you were given no direction on what to do next. Nothing but trauma and coping mechanisms. Like, yeah, there has to be a path. There has to be a plan. There has to be communication between the Aiel and the dragon, not just the dragon dictating what he thinks they would like. You have to actually listen to the marginalized people who have been oppressed and made subservient and only know how to function. You have to listen to them when they say that they have feelings and not just dictate to them.
And the spear can be used for peace. Although, I mean, using the army for peacekeeping mission is a whole other can of worms that we should get into with the American system and how well that's worked.
I do have a lot of questions about having just an armed military force that's accountable only to itself, and a well-armed society is a polite society. I definitely have some questions there. But I feel like, you know, Rand, before he gets the update from Aviendha and Perrin to an extent, Rand just thinks that he can order everyone around like little pawns, and Aviendha and Perrin are both like people, especially Perrin, right? Perrin, we think of him mostly as affecting the decision about the seals, but Perrin also factors largely into the Dragon's Peace decision. He really helps contribute to that. Like, you know, maybe armies are made out of people who all have motivations, and you need to speak to their motivations if you want to redirect them to some other enemy.
And that really is Perrin's arc, right? Perrin does something that Rand has never been able to accomplish, which is taking forces from multiple different nations and uniting them together into one cohesive force. That is his storyline, is his ability to really bring people together in a way that Rand forces them together, forges them together, you know, threatens them together, but they're always allies. They're never one people. Perrin is able to forge a new people out of, he's the blacksmith. He forges a new group of people out of these desperate pieces.
And to his credit, Rand is a force of destruction. He is prophesied and described as a force of destruction, not construction.
He's the plow that breaks people apart, not the blacksmith that forces them back together again. Yeah,
Exactly.
and that's why I think Perrin should have played a bigger role in the dragon, the unifying of the armies, right? Like, yes, he does have some role in the Dragon's Peace, but like, I think he should have been the battlefield leader in the way that like Matt is out there making plans. He should have been sort of the planner, but Perrin should have been out there at the forefront of the charge.
Yeah, he's a bannerman. He's a play caller. He's a coach.
I think, Matt should be doing things like, okay, I need you guys to cross over that river, and Perrin should be out there being like, all right, grab the logs, like,
yeah, totally.
Matt says, hold this side of the river. Perrin does it.
Right. Yeah. But alas, the Aiel are death spiraling.
Yeah.
Because they were left just repeating the traumas of the past rather than moving forward into the future. And at that point, Aviendha is nearly at the center of the ring of columns. She is midway through the arc. She's putting it together. She's figuring out what's actually happening. She's not confused at this point in the process. And she's, seeing the hints of Aiel culture that have been warped, right? Battle stripped completely of point or reason.
The lack of honor, the disintegration of everything she believes in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question, Marzipan. Have they learned to dance aside from the spears? Their only songs are battle chants or dirges for the dead. Yeah, you have to really go through an intentional community process of deciding who are we and what are we doing. And Rand couldn't dictate that for them, but he certainly could shut it down before it even got started, which is clearly what happened in this timeline.
I mean, when everyone in the society is dedicated to battle and you can't fight anymore, like you can't do your hobby, you can't do your favorite thing, you can't do, your job. I mean, just take away everybody's job in a society and see what happens, right? Like everyone's the existential dread that people go through when they lose their purpose in life.
Right, or when you take away their religion, their farming techniques, their cottage industry, the land they live on, the language they speak, the way that they style their hair and food, like, genocide, basically, right? Like the Aiel are facing this like do or die point for their entire cultural identity. And yeah, what Nakomi really asks is like, who do we want to be if we had choice? Let's sit down and think about it. Because, yeah, just winding up into an endless war with the Seanchan, who are going to get stronger the more they capture. Yeah, it's a war of attrition you're never going to win. Like, yeah, all the societies all exist to hold down different aspects of battle technique, right? I mean, we even see it in one of the other visions, right? That the Stone Dogs are one of the last battle societies to exist. Like, what if those societies reinvented themselves? Kind of like how the Red Aja has to totally reimagine what its purpose is. If men don't have to be gentled for the sake of everyone's safety, what does the Red Aja do? They can pivot, but they have to actively and intentionally pivot.
And you have to look at what your bigger mission statement is. Your narrow mission statement is we deal with men who can channel and kill them because that's the only way we know how to deal with them. But look at your bigger mission statement. We deal with men who can channel. And now that killing them is not the only way to deal with them, how do you pivot to, okay, if what we're doing isn't killing them and hunting them down, maybe it's bonding them.
Right. Maybe it's innovating. Maybe it's building stuff.
Building stuff with them, because dealing with them now is not just dealing with them, but working with them.
Yeah. So again, for the Aiel, how do you turn your skills and tools of violence into something productive in a world where fighting each other isn't the point? Well, enforcing peace does sound on the surface of it like a very good pitch, as much as we might, question if that's going to work long term. Like, it makes a lot of sense as a pivot for people who know nothing but war.
And as much as fuck the police is a police with honor is something that there are better police systems in place than the ones we have in America.
Oh, yeah, no, the concept of people that are empowered to fix problems quickly and decisively, like, that's not bad. American cops are bastards, but the concept of people that are like, let me step in and break up this fight is not inherently bad. Particularly when you're talking about, these fantasy nations on the brink of, like, a second world war right after they finish the first, right? It really makes a lot of sense instead of just, figure it out.
All cops are bastards. Sorry.
Especially the cop in your head. Kill the cop in your head. So yeah, Aviendha is at this point very much wondering how could this happen, and with that, we will take another step forward and back.
We're going back through the chapter. So for
Yeah.
us, it's forward and back through the chapter.
So if we hop back farther, I think this one is more generations. I think.
Yeah, we're seeing the dissolution, the dissolving of a society. And so as we go forward, there's less and less information about the society and what's been going on because the people are becoming more and more ignorant. Less they're just like, I'm living in terror and pain and poverty. I don't know how we got here, but it's bad.
Yeah. And this is now we're again with a child, right? We're with a 14-year-old, right? Ladalin was like old. And now we're with a much younger child, and clearly a lot more has happened. Very hard to say how many generations we've gone on, but it's a while. This is the one where we learned that the Stone Dogs are one of the only societies left, that most of them have just dissolved.
Right. Yeah. Again, seeing the pieces of the Aiel society fall by the wayside, piece by piece by piece. The societies are basically gone. Guy Shine were gone in the last vision. Honor is essentially gone, is what they're saying at this point.
Yeah, honor, it's not even gone in the sense that, like, choices have been made. Like, it's been gone. There's just dust where honor used to be. The Shanshan have clearly switched to a much more genocidal, like, war of extermination, right? I mean, we even hear in the last one, we're like, oh, if we retreat, the Shanshan said that they'll do a genocide if we retreat. If we don't surrender, then they will make sure we all die. And here we are seeing evidence of that, right? This is a tiny little hold built out of absolutely nothing in the middle of nowhere, and it's still being raided and firebombed because the Shanshan promised, we will exterminate every last one of you if you don't surrender right now. And they didn't, so...
And they're an effective bureaucracy that are just, they're like, oh, yep, that's still the order, and no one can change that order, so we're going to keep doing it until there's nothing left.
Yeah, and it's this and then the other one. I mean, all the visions in the Waste always make me think of what the American Southwest would have been like in like the 1880s. You know, just this railroad crawling its way across the landscape.
Yes.
These waves of people with metal clothes and boomsticks just keep destroying your villages because they were, you know, in the way of the railroad. And just finding where the women and children are and burning them out and driving them off to just starve in the desert. Like, it feels like the Southwest at the turn of the last century.
Yeah. Yeah, the Native American being the Aiel and the Europeans expanding out west, yeah.
Yeah, specifically the Southwest with the railroad. It just, it gives me gold rush energy. And so this girl, Tava, is clearly still descended from the line of the dragon, right? They're all Aviendha's descendants, and her father like has red hair and keeps his face shaved and still wears the clothes of Aiel, is practical enough to pick up a sword because it's just a weapon, right? He's so rand-coded. It's
interesting. The Aiel now have thick beards, and they shave as tradition. And the people who don't have beards are the weird ones. Whereas the Aiel, I feel like certainly in the Age of Legends, but I thought in Aviendha's days, the men didn't really grow beards.
Yeah, they've always been a clean-shaven people, which, whatever.
But I thought in terms of they didn't grow beard, like they didn't really grow much of a beard, right? Like they didn't have to shave because they didn't actually grow much facial hair.
Yeah, I guess they don't talk about shaving much. So yeah, maybe it's a matter of so many wetlanders have come into the gene pool because of the, you know, half century that they spent on the other side of the Dragon Wall.
That's kind of what I'm imagining, yeah.
It's a lot more of the beard-growing gene.
Right, and now they have to shave in order to maintain traditional clean-shaven, but that was genetically, the Aiel just didn't grow beards.
Right, yeah.
In the same way that, like, a lot of Asian men don't grow, you know, a thick beard and don't have to do a lot of shaving, you know? Like, there's that mix of genetics. Or Native Americans, yeah.
That's gotta be a reflection of how many of the bearded wetlanders interbred into the population during the decades that they were working together, fighting together. Even despite the fact that there wasn't a Dragon's Peace, right? There's still definitely many men and women who were like, the Aiel seem pretty cool. I'm gonna go live with them instead.
I mean, you can have more interbreeding when there's not peace.
Well, I more just meant that they weren't like having good like exchange program relations between all the allies. Wasn't really speaking with the Shan, but just like, you know, like the Andorrans, right? They don't have the Dragon's Peace alignment, but like individuals are still going to be trading and falling in love and, you know, moving, because it's like they just live on the other side of town. Like it's not like they're far away on the other side of a mountain range. They're just right there.
We also get like just how far they've fallen in terms of battle. Like her dad kills one invader and that's the only victory in the entire fight. They kill one person. And it's like, what happened to the Aiel, these incredible fighters who could take down 2 or 3 warriors at a time? And it's like they technologically have been just completely outclassed.
And they've lost all of their knowledge of the waste, right? They were in the wetlands for decades, and then they were forced to retreat as part of a war of attrition. And as we see in the last visions, like they don't know the plants to eat. They don't know how to find water. Like the knowledge of the land has been lost, which again, very much like the genocide of the Native Americans. They're like, if we move you to a different location, if we forbid you your language, then in like just one generation, now, when your kids run away from the residential school, they don't know how to survive, so they'll come back on their own. Even though their grandparents could have survived out there just fine, the chain's been broken.
And we see them not wearing cotton sore because that makes them a target, wearing the clothing of their people.
Yeah, to be known as Aiel means death, right? You can either assimilate or die, and assimilation has been made a matter of subterfuge rather than just, you know, kissing the ring of empire.
Yeah, a don't ask, don't tell situation, except they will ask.
Oh, yes, they will be asking. They will be asking. They will probably be, you know, family tree rattling and genetic testing just as soon as they figure that out, you know? They think of swords as bad luck.
Not really forbidden, just bad luck.
They're just bad luck, and there's no connection to why. So it's like, it's a sword. Like, use it to kill people, which, you know, was the logic that the Aiel used to go from being peaceful to warriors in the first place. Was like, they made that one rule about swords, and now we're reiterating that to the point that, even the prohibition on swords doesn't make sense anymore. Now we just need to protect ourselves. But yeah, that whole raid, only one guy died. Only one guy
Of
died.
the enemy.
Yeah, of the enemy. And then they talk about, okay, maybe we can rebuild, maybe we can move deeper into the waste. And they say, no, the Raven Empire has sent word to the far ones, the Sharans, and they hunt us at the eastern border, right? This is literally, the noose is closing. The space in which they have to hide is shrink. Yeah, totally, Vuji. They're totally going to go with phrenology. Would be them.
And they've reached a point where they've invested so much. They've invested the last of everything they had in this settlement, months and months of work, wiped out instantly before we can reap any benefits from it. And it's like, we can rebuild again. It's like, we can't. We have nothing left. We put everything we had into rebuilding this settlement. And so no longer are they a people. They are scattering as individuals. This is the last moment when they were a people.
And it reminds me of when the Tuatha'an split from the Gen. It's the same thing of, I can do better on my own. We are better when we abandon our cultural markers. We are safer if we just stop being a people.
It's very interesting that this feels like the death of the Aiel in the same way that the death of the Gen felt like the death of the Aiel. The difference is the warrior society was able to survive and continue to exist. This is very much the elimination of the genetic line entirely.
Yeah, this is not just the culture. This is down to the literal genome.
And which, it's interesting, right? Because over enough time, you either become everyone's ancestor or nobody's ancestor, right? Right? There's always, at some point in the genetic timeline, we all share an ancestor. And so, you know, as your children go down, either like your genetics spread so you have a little bit of genetics in everybody, or they come down to a point so your genetics are irrelevant. And I feel like that is what the Ter'angreal is really designed to do. It shows you visions of a future where the genetic line that you found goes down to 0.
Maybe that's kind of how it extrapolates forward in the timeline.
Right. And that's how it shows you. It shows you basically enough visions to get to that point to where your genetic line ends. And that gives you enough foresight to try and change that outcome and expand your genetic line to expand into everybody.
So it's like eugenics, but good because it's for your whole culture.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that the whole point of evolution and genetics, which is to get your genes into as many offspring as possible?
It is true. That is the only thing evolution, quote unquote, cares about is, did you manage to reproduce before dying? That's literally all that matters.
And so I feel like the columns just do that on a more extensive multi-generational level now.
Yeah.
Where like, is there at any point, is there something that will result in the winnowing and death of your offspring?
So then Vuji raises an interesting question. What if an individual is not going to have kids? how is this going to work?
In the same way that you saw through maybe one of the other, you didn't see the direct line. You didn't see the, Oncala's child. Maybe you saw through one of her sisters, right? So you have relationships. You have people around you who will continue to have kids. So maybe you see through your sister's genetic line.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like how in Bobaverse, he's like, oh yeah, these are my descendants, even though they're technically his sister's descendants. He's
Exactly.
like, fuck it, close enough.
Close enough. They're descendants of his parents.
Right, yeah. So it is an interesting thought to think that maybe certain Aiel wise ones will be unable to experience the Terangrial because they're from a very small dying family and they're kind of where that point ends and like you just don't see anything.
It's like I went in and I saw my nephew's life where she then died without having children and that was it. And you go to your nephew and you're like, you have to have kids.
Right. Yeah, totally. It's a weird implication. Well, of course, everyone has a large family.
Uh-huh.
Is that some more Mormonism creeping into this, maybe?
I mean, I think with the Aiel, again, because this is worked on the genetics and the Aiel are so closely genetically related that basically as long as the Aiel have descendants, you are closely enough related to those people to see the Aiel going forward. In the same way that like if you're Aiel, you have grandparents who are Aiel, and it's a little more direct.
But the thing will find some common descendants for you that you do share a direct ancestor with, and be like, there, close enough.
Assuming the Aiel people continue as a people, which is what the whole point of the columns is.
Right. So then, at what point do the columns recognize that the Aiel people are gone as a people? Do the columns somehow know when like critical mass has been lost?
Right. What if they just die out through inbreeding?
Right, which is, again, why I don't think that Nakomi is like a regular flesh and blood person the inbreeding aspect is too weird. But, yeah, so like one day do like the columns just like crumble and die because there's like no one left for them?
I meant intra-breeding, not necessarily in it.
Between.
Yeah, intra,
gotcha,
not
gotcha.
So between groups where the way that the Neanderthals died out, which is no one really killed them, we just fucked them out of existence.
We outcompeted them.
Sure.
While also snagging some genetic souvenirs
to
take forward.
Genetic souvenirs, nice.
That's what we call these traits. It's 4% of our DNA. It's a souvenir. Been there, done that, got the ridge teeth.
Uh-huh. And the autism.
Yeah, well. It's a lot there we don't understand. But
no, we don't. We don't. That's all speculative.
A lot of very interesting speculation, but yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's sort of the dropping of the sword, the dissipating of the Aiel. This is the last and the death of the Aiel. We're seeing the disillusionment of a people into individuals, and then the next visions we see are the death of the individuals.
Yeah, it fractures into tiny little bits, and even those sparks burn out and die.
So Norlesh.
Yeah, this is perhaps the saddest one.
Ugh. That anytime a woman loses a baby, does this happen in the original visions where one of the women loses a baby?
We've got lots of child death, but I don't think there's an infant death in the original. I think there's mention of like a kid like struck down by fever in his first year or something like that. Maybe.
God, I'm having deja vu about another woman struggling through the desert and discovering her child was dead. Maybe I'm just thinking of this scene.
I think this only happens like this once.
Okay.
One can easily imagine that it happened to the Gen in their time of wandering before. Oh, Spitwinkle says it was in Dune.
I believe you. I mean, it very much could be. It very much could be that like a scene very much like this was in Dune.
Yeah, but it's hard to imagine that this hasn't happened every time a band of people has been forced to wander through the desert, right? This is just like, this has happened a lot. It's been inferred, directly looked at, implied. But yeah, Norlesh has somehow managed to have a lot of kids despite all the deprivation of their lives. Yeah, so this is what really gives me the gold rush energy, the early days of settler colonialism in the American Southwest, because there's these outlanders who are, farmsteading and have a charter on the edge of the known world. And then these, native local people come up and they're like, hey, we have some of the ore that you want. Can we have any food at all in exchange for this ore? Because that's why you're here, right? They're not here to have a city. They're not here to build railroads. They're just here to get the ore. That's what they're seeing. They're unwilling to risk their charter by giving any amount of charity to these people, even in exchange for ore. And like, that guy spent weeks getting, it's just like with the next vision with the hold, the one we just talked about, where like it took them months to put together that hold and it burned down overnight. This guy spent weeks dragging his family around looking for these rocks, and they're just rejected outright because, it's a zero tolerance policy from the Raven Empire because there's so many people they can make be homesteaders,
And they probably aren't even that valuable of rocks, right? He probably got like low value versions of them, right? That, if you've got a whole crew digging for these rocks, they're probably shipping tons and tons and tons of them. And this one guy with one rock, it's like, that's really not worth anything anyway.
Yeah, also that, which also speaks to the hopelessness of it, right? Like they're so desperate, they don't even know at what scale to try to get into this, right? They're just like, we found a few rocks with like maybe, an ounce. We found like, enough bag of gold that there's maybe an ounce, or enough bag of dirt that maybe there's an ounce of gold in it. And they're like, we're here for like many ounces of gold. We're not going to risk our charter for you.
No, and just like he was a good man or had been once when he'd been strong and fit, like the lack of meals, lack of food, the desperation turns you into a bad person, turns you into a desperate person who will do things that aren't honorable, aren't good.
And he's not even a bad person. He's not even doing anything that's not honorable. He's just like, he's this tall man who appears to be groveling.
He's just a starving person. Yeah.
Before these other people, right? And he doesn't fight for food. He just turns and walks away. Like he's not bad. He's just beaten, completely and utterly hollowed out by a lack of options. And then they like wander off into the darkness and find like a shelf of rock to sort of sit under for the night. No fire, no food, no water, which again, I'm like, Aviendha would have been able to find food and water, but they've been so many generations cut off from that ancestral knowledge of how to live off of the land that they're just going to starve and freeze out in the barren wastelands that their ancestors used to completely own.
And at this point, we're at a stage where Aviendha still thinks this is the past. And she's like, God, thank God Rand didn't tell us about this part of our past, because she hasn't put together, she just sees people starving in the waste and doesn't realize that this is future yet.
Right. She thinks of the shame of how bad this is. She's not yet hit the despair of this is my fault. This is our future. This is her going, oh, we came from even more destitute circumstances than I thought. How shameful. Oh, yeah. And she mentions that our people haven't been able to keep a home since my great mother Tava's day. So there we do get a sense of how.
It's been 2 generations, yeah.
Yeah. Which means that Tava managed to live long enough and survive long enough to have at least one child, right? She was 14 watching all that stuff burn down, but they've still managed to keep going long enough that, 2 more generations have managed to be born. But here she is, 3 children dead in the last 18 months, and then 1 more dies in her arms in this scene. She still has 1 living child, but like, the genocide is genociding along.
Right. Because she's like, what are we going to do? And he's just like, we're going to die. Like, I don't know why are you arguing? Like,
yeah, he doesn't say really much of anything. It's you just keep running the same old routines, but you're insane because you're getting nothing from it. But everything you try doesn't work.
You have no options. And you've tried everything.
So like, there's nothing to even talk about. And she can barely even summon sadness for the fact that her child died, because it's like, well, what did any of us expect? There's no emotion left in the tank, It's, the Raven Empire sucks, hot take. Like, the Shan-Chan Empire sucks, but the Raven Empire sucks worse.
Mm-hmm. And what we're seeing is an effectively carried out genocide, which is probably happened more often in our history than we'd like to admit.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of people who don't exist that we've never heard of that were wiped out by some other society near them, who we've also never heard of, right? But like, yeah, we very much, I'm convinced by history that Homo sapiens have just absolutely devastated life in every place they've expanded into, all large life, right? Whether you're talking about predators, herd animals, the great extinction of our era follows the expansion of humans.
Are we talking about human extinction, or are we talking about animal extinction?
Yes. Humans
Okay.
are animals, right? Like, you very much have this, like, at what point do you draw the line between humans wiping out, woolly mammoths, wiping out Neanderthals, and wiping out another tribe of humans?
The degree of speed and intentionality, I think, because no one meant to get rid of the mammoth. But yeah, it's one of the things that I trip out on a lot when I get into, YouTube videos about like the history of Europe specifically, just like how many, like the pottery, the different kinds of pottery scales. Like there's this one YouTube channel I really like to watch that gets really into that stuff. Dude clearly has a history bender. Whenever he wants to write a book, he'll go on a history bender, and it's like very, very cool because then he writes books that are well informed by archaeology. But yeah, the archaeology of anywhere that's been dissected over, 2,000-3,000 years worth of human history is like, how many of these people that we're studying don't have any living descendants today because of how thoroughly this particular conflict we see the archaeological evidence of? Like, was this like total extermination or just like a little bit of a fight? Because it changes, right? You can't always tell. Sometimes you can tell, but it does make me wonder sometimes, like, of who invented the science of archaeology. How many of those people are at all descended from the people they're studying?
Mm-hmm.
And how many of those entire family lines, those entire groups are gone because of those events, like to say nothing of, subsequent centuries. It's hard to say.
Well, and that's where, the wiping out of people means the wiping out of history, especially oral history.
Yeah. Yeah. Food ways and weaving techniques and stuff like that. Yeah.
Why do we know so much about the Greek and the Romans? Because they wrote shit down.
And those documents have managed to be preserved. I was watching a video recently about some stash, I think it was actually from the Library of Alexandria, some stash of documents that because of the fire, we still have them because the fire baked the clay tablets so that they wouldn't get washed away by rain over the subsequent several centuries before they were uncovered.
That's
it's
funny.
Like a lot of this would have all melted away into mud because it was just clay tablets, but the fire did actually do us a solid in this one particular wing of the building.
Destroyed all the papyrus, but preserved the clay.
But baked the clay, so... Yeah, no, it's the ways, the tenuousness which an oral tradition exists is a little scary. It's a little scary.
So I got to admit, reading the Aviendha sections, we've kind of been skipping over them. Rand was devastated in a much more central way. I feel like Aviendha's kind of shrugging this off in a way. I don't know. No, you think she's all right?
No, she's got tears streaming down her face and is begging to not go on because the shame is tearing her apart. I feel like she's way more emotionally affected than Rand because Rand is like, I don't know these people. Like, he just feels the emotional pain of the person, right? He comes out of it feeling their pain, whereas Aviendha's coming out of it putting it into context, and that's a very different angst.
I think that's why it feels different to me, is because, like, she's like, oh yeah, within context. She's not like, oh my God, Tava, this 14-year-old, I cry for her, as much as, like...
She's not feeling the pain of having just had her child die in her arms. She's feeling the pain of the loss of honor.
Right. And I feel like that's also a writing distinction, right? I feel like Jordan was just better at making me feel the pain of the characters.
Yeah, but she's not shrugging it off. She's just much more leaping to the end implication than she is experiencing it.
It was probably a poor choice of words on my part, but like I feel very different emotionally between Aviendha and Rand when I get to the end of these things. Like, we're not really talking about Aviendha's reaction the way I feel like we were devastated by Rand's.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that difference, but yeah, Aviendha is always about the larger shame, the larger emotional structure of it. Whereas, yeah, Rand was just going on a roller coaster.
It felt like every tragedy felt like a personal tragedy for Rand, whereas with Aviendha, this feels very much like a society-ending tragedy, which in a lot of ways, like, we're more disconnected from society-ending tragedies than personal ones, right? That's why you have to tell personal stories to get people. You can't give people statistics.
Interesting that Aviendha, a woman, has to carry the structure for her entire society, whereas Rand, a man, gets to have his own personal experience. At least Aviendha got to wear her clothes this time. Big fan of a big, intense ceremony for a woman happening while she is not clad in the light. Yeah, so before we get to the last vision, she has a lot of thoughts in between the first and the second vision in the written order. Like, these columns had shown the Aiel what they needed to know. This is a challenge to her. She goes into this super seeking knowledge. I think that might also be part of the difference between her and Rand, is Rand's going there trying to fulfill a prophecy, whereas Aviendha is choosing to do her dissertation on this. Rand didn't have a choice in the same way. I don't know if that makes it better or worse that they have different emotional reactions.
No, and it makes sense because Aviendha's seeing the death of her people, whereas Rand, the people didn't mean anything to him at that point. It was the individuals he would connect with more.
But yeah, then we get to the first of the visions, which is really cool. I mean, as far as like post-apocalyptic, holy shit, we're not in Kansas anymore writing. This one hits you across the face.
It is the moment when you're like, oh my God, this is like advanced technology. This is the Age of Legends / modern age come again. You know, it very much gives you this idea of what the future could be if it wasn't just quite as dystopian as it is in this vision.
Yeah, and we have no idea the distance between this generation and the last one, right? The folk barely have a proper spoken language anymore, right? They have a harsh, broken language of the folk, right? They are really transcending down to animals at this point. We have no idea. Like, they have names and ages, but no idea of generations.
The men all have ragged beards, mishmash of clothing, nothing, you know, there's no uniform, nothing like Had and Sore, anything. They're wearing basically anything they can put on their skin to keep the sun off.
Yeah, they've got no weapons, no pots, no hats, nothing.
And they're scavengers. They're living off the trash and the discards of another people.
Yeah, they are doing the cockroach last extreme of humanity, right? They do nothing but follow the light makers with their because they just shed so much trash. You can live off of their trash. But that's all they've got. That's the only thing they have is a parasitic existence that is still a war of attrition, even though the Shan-Chan seem to be basically over the war, right? Like the way that the Shan-Chan talk about the Aiel in this is like the war's over. They won. There's still just these weird little dregs on the edge. And if you go out on the frontier, sometimes you still have to deal with some of the natives. But, you know, the Shan-Chan Imperial War Machine has moved on to a different conflict at this point.
And at this point, it's just a matter of time till these last survivors are wiped out or just die in the waste. The waste will wipe them out. They can't survive on their own. They can't survive off the land. They have to raid people for sustenance, and they will be killed for doing that.
And I assume that this is the very last of Aviendha's descendants. I assume that this is the very, very last one of her entire genetic legacy, and that this is the end generation of them, at least as far as her family line goes.
What are the Shan-Chan weapons?
Guns?
But they don't make a bang. They make like a hiss sound.
Yeah. Maybe they figured out how to make some sort of magic gun. Like they figured out rifles and they were like, that's too loud and stinky. We want to like use a magic trigger instead. But it's still, you know, riffing off of the concept of a gun. Or maybe they reinvented shock lances. We really only ever hear about shock lances from the Age of Legends. Maybe this is some kind of like updated, rediscovered design of that.
Yeah, I that's entirely... I was thinking some sort of gun that didn't use gunpowder, but I like the idea of shock lance of some kind. Maybe I'm thinking rail gun, magnetically propelled bullet, right?
Yeah. That would totally make sense. And yeah, so they're creeping around this camp of the light makers, and they have a massive wagon with no horses, large enough to house 12 people, that moves magically during the daylight.
They got a Hummer.
Yeah. We also hear about this massive roadway that's being created in the waste, made by laying down strange pieces of metal that were too big to pry up.
Railroad tracks.
And one guy had shown her a large nail he had found that he uses to scrape meat off of bones. And having grown up next to a very derelict but still functional rail line, yeah, you find railroad spikes all over the place. It's very easy to collect hundreds of them over just a couple of summers of wandering around.
And it's like incredibly crazy that like what is trash to this society is now one of the most valuable things they have because it's, you know, a piece of metal. You ever see the movie The Gods Are Strange?
The Gods Must Be Crazy?
Yes, thank you. The Gods Must Be Crazy.
Yes, I have seen The Gods Must Be Crazy.
Sort of just the same way that like a Coke bottle falling out of the sky becomes this artifact that is so advanced and harder than anything else they have, and they use it as this tool and they fight over the tool, and it's like it's this. I feel like the spike is the same way, where it's like this object of power from another society that is made out of steel that you just can't make, and so it becomes this object of power from a different society. But culturally it's very different because of the oppression and stuff like that, but
like it shows you how far down that the Aiel have come, that like a railroad nail is like mysterious and magical, much less the horse's carriage, much less the steady burning light, much less the just access to food, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Aiel of today would find Aviendha's people advanced, much less.
Right, exactly. The concept of having clothes you made yourself and a hold you own yourself and food you grew yourself. It's like, that's so far beyond what these people are able to get anymore. All they have is railroad ties and scraps of dirty meat, the trimmed fat in the garbage.
The one time she ate well was 2 years ago. The last time she was full, right? And she killed a man over that, right? Like, which also makes her despicable, right? Because it's like you killed someone just to eat, but like, yeah, you kill somebody to eat.
Yeah, because that's what it is, right? It's these extermination policy. And yeah, if you are dumb enough to go out there with resources and no guards, then a swarm of desperate people will eat you and all of your stuff, because that's what your people have done to them.
And then, of course, she's killed for being in the garbage.
Right, yeah, the security light goes off, the guards come over and, shoot pepper balls that are actually lethal at the fleeing Aiel, and she dies from it. And they're like, man, these are just pests. It's such a pain in the ass. Like, they weren't doing any harm. Well, I've seen them slit a man's throat, which, like, she literally just admitted to slitting a man's throat for food. So, like, So you
understand, like, yeah, of course he's going to kill them to defend himself, right? Why wouldn't he? These are a threat to his life when he sleeps.
Right, but it's also like, they look at them like rabid dogs or poisonous snakes, not like people. They aren't an enemy worth fighting. They aren't a people worth being afraid of. They're just a natural hazard, like a cactus.
Poisonous lizard.
Yeah, that's all that they are to them anymore. The Aiel are a mythic bygone era villain, right? They are a story. They don't exist anymore, even as this woman's blood pours out onto the ground. Like, the Aiel are long gone, long before she was shot.
It kind of reminds me the way Aviendha, when she steps on the lizard and just spears it as she's walking through the desert, and is like, yeah, it's poisonous. That's why you kill it as you're going by, right? Like, that's kind of how the Lightbringers are now approaching the Aiel, is just another hazard of the waste that you eliminate.
Yeah. Oh, well, next time we'll bury the trash, and then we won't have to kill a child who was trying to eat the trimmed meat out of our garbage. They're just a hazard, just bears turning over trash bins in your neighborhood that should never have been built into the bears' neighborhood in the first place.
And yeah, and it's the last violation of every bit of honor that Aviendha has. The scavenging, the begging, the lack of knowledge, the essentially being an animal, right? It's just the final blow to Aviendha's perception.
Yeah, because they always are looking down on people who don't know how to find water, who don't know how to defend themselves. Like, that's such a core part of Aiel arrogance over soft wetlanders. And now she has seen, even in the waste, this total degradation, this total loss, and it's a lot. And so with that, I think we can move forward to her last POV, contemporary POV, the end of Court of the Sun.
So after she's gone through all the columns, after seen all these visions in reverse order.
Yeah, after all of that, she was exhausted. Her mind was drained. Her heart opened as if bleeding out strength with every beat. She is tired.
How did one react to seeing the utter destruction, know the utter decay of one's people? That's really that first vision, and realizing that's where your people end up.
Yeah, and should anyone have to see such terrible visions, right? Is knowing that worth more trouble than it's worth? Like, what's the point? And she tries to get the columns to react again, and they're like, no, we need a long rest before we give you more magic. And yeah, you get one of these experiences per lifetime. If you want someone else to experience this, you have to send a new candidate. That's yours. That's your go.
Do you think new candidates will see the vision of the past, or just see visions of the future?
That's a good question. I bet they only see the future.
You think that's the last time that anyone's going to see the history of the Aiel people?
Yeah, I think it's going to pass into oral tradition and story only, because now everyone knows, right? It's no longer exclusive information. So I think that Aviendha's transition is permanent for that.
You don't think they're going to lose that information over time? The whole point of the columns was, not, information fades over time, and the columns keep it fresh. They keep you from forgetting because you're re-experiencing it.
But that was so that they would perform their duty at the last battle. And so once they perform the duty at the last battle, then, like, to whatever degree the oral story stays on, because, like, the oral story will stay, right? Every Aiel knows the story now. It will become part of their oral tradition, but it doesn't have the same, and this is to prepare you for what comes next kind of deal.
Fuji makes a good point. Written tradition, too, because they do write and read.
They are big fans of books. So I think that the columns don't need to hold the history anymore, and so they're only going to show the future. I mean, Loyal would probably be willing to help them ghostwrite an encyclopedia of their knowledge, you know?
He's already written a good chunk of their history in his books. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
We also sort of get this statement, right? She felt almost certain that what she had experienced was not simply one of many possibilities. What she had seen would occur. So, right, assuming she doesn't make any changes, this is the future.
Right, which, as we've pointed out, there's a lot of holes in that, but I don't think she's wrong that she does need to do something in response to this. This was a vision meant to change her behavior. And then she has the most important resolution to the question, I think. The question that Nakomi posed, the question that all of this poses. Can I change it? If I can't, will that stop me from trying? Like, that's the core resolution of the question, is like, would knowing that I'm going to fail or knowing the end make me stop trying? No, because we are a fierce and independent people, where it's a fierce and independent Aviendha, fierce and independent everyone. No, we're not going to accept this future. Even if we know that it's ironclad, we're still going to, scream defiance until the last breath and spit in Sightblinder's eye, right? Like, that's still who we are.
I kind of feel the same way about free will, where it's like, whether or not you believe in free will, you have to act like you have it.
Yes, absolutely. If you don't accept that free will is an important part of how you move through the world, you will make weird decisions for yourself.
Right. If you just say, well, I'm not actually making any choices, it's like, you might not be, but you have to act like you're making choices.
Yeah. You have to act like you have agency, like you have choice, like you have flexibility. Otherwise, you can just be an asshole and sad. But yeah, philosophically, free will is trickier.
And I do feel like prophecy and free will are tied up very tightly together. It's one of the things I really love about the Lycanus trilogy, which I've talked about here plenty of times. But that's really sort of the central question of that series is, given prophecy that is unchangeable, do you have free will? And it's sort of the central conflict between the good guys and the bad guys, right? Is like, the bad guys are like, no, we want to go back and change the past. That's what free will means, is we can change decisions we've already made. And the good guys, good guys in this situation. And so I like those books because it's not as clear cut to me who's good and who's bad, even when you get to the end of the series. But the good guys are essentially saying, no, you've made your decisions. You have to live with them. And I think that's really the philosophy that it's trying to convey, is like, once you make your decisions, you can't live your life in the past wanting to change those things. That only leads to death and destruction and regret. You have to make your choices and live with them. Yeah.
And as a person who will not be playing on hero mode in Baldur's Gate 3, I don't appreciate that take. I am a save scum person. I save all the time, and I often wish that the world had the ability. Can I just go back to the last save point and redo that? That was not how I wanted to handle that. I would love to reload real quick.
But life isn't like that, right? Like, every time you do something, every time you make a decision, are there things I would have done differently had I known? Yes, of course. Around everything. But there's no point for me for ruminating over those scenarios. I mean, there's a certain amount of like, yes, it's important to like think about the choices you've made so that you can not continue to make bad choices, right? Like, it's important on that level. But it's not, I don't like to go back and say, if only I had dated this person, taken the job, gone to the college, not gone to the college, made the move across the country, not made the move across the country. Like, all of those things are choices that I have made at some point in my life. And if I'd made the different choice, would I be in a different place? Absolutely. Would it be better or worse? Who knows? Does it matter? Absolutely not. Can I make a change? Absolutely not. And so I feel like I've gone on quite a tangent there, but free will is interesting. Free will is because you can't live two lives. You can only live the life that you live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Aviendha basically comes to the same realization that, like, worrying about it, you got to worry about it enough to have a good answer to the question of what do I want for the future. But you can't worry about it too much because you got to change it.
And you can't not do anything about it, assuming that what you've seen is inevitable.
Yeah. So, yeah, all I have left is a nice, resounding, resolute readout.
Go for it.
She opened her eyes and gritted her teeth. Aiel took responsibility. Aiel fought. Aiel stood for honor. If she was the only one who knew the terrors of their future, then it was her duty, as a wise one, to act. She would save her people. She walked from the pillars, then broke into a run. She needed to return, to consult with the other wise ones. But first she needed quiet, out in the Threefold Land. Time to think. She does a good thinky think, right? She thinks on the way in. She has this really intense experience. Then she goes back up, probably, I'm assuming, to the same rock shelf where she had dinner with Nakomi. This like, whew, a lot has changed since I was here last.
Yeah.
And of course, Nakomi doesn't visit her again, but I bet she was hoping it would happen.
Yeah, of course. Like, what do you, now that I've had these visions, can we talk a little more, please?
Nope.
Nope.
Fortunately, you have excellent wise ones to go talk to, so.
Right. And yeah, I think they do a pretty good job of dealing with the information.
Yeah, they process it pretty well. They take measured responses to it. They don't freak out and like throw Aviendha off a cliff to make sure that none of that happens. You know, like they try to roll forward with it. And I believe that what happens in the future will not be what we just saw because she will change some things.
Absolutely.
And so therefore, whatever the fallout is, it will be different. Will it be better? Will it be worse? Will it come to the same sort of exterminatory end? Who can say? But it will be different.
And I firmly believe that the Aiel now have the ability to continually course correct, right? As long as they're sending wise ones to Ruidion, they will continue to get visions of the future, of worst possible case scenarios that are going to happen, and they're able to steer away from them. You know, it's the lookout of the future who's saying, you know, rocks ahead, turn left.
Right. They've basically given themselves a Cassandra mechanic, but without the not being believed part.
Right. Because the wise ones have established that they're very good at, you know, predicting the future already from dreams.
I wonder if they'll end up doing like Oracle type behaviors for the whole continent, you know?
I mean, that's basically what she's doing, right? This is the future of everybody.
What if every country like has an Aiel soothsayer in it, and like because of the fact that they have an Aiel advisor, that means that they can see the future of their nation when that person, like, you know, does their visions or whatever.
But I mean, they've got the sort of hints of future visions from the rings. You've got the dreamers. Now you've got the crystal column visions of the future. There's a lot of prophecy going on in the wise ones. And I mean, and that's always been part of them, right? Back from when they showed up and were like, we weren't sure you were going to show up.
Yeah, here's a letter that was going to get delivered months before you ever came to this address. Yeah.
And if you came and he came, then you'd die. And if you came and not him came, you'd die. And like, yeah, all these things about like all the possibilities around that travel. Very, very detailed based on the dreams. Aiel doomsayers, right?
Yeah, doomseers, right?
Seers.
Sean Shan's doomseer?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. But you only get one vision per lifetime as an Aiel, so that might be of less utility to an empire.
Yes, but you also have the rings, which has always been helpful, and you still have dreamers.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, we don't really get to see how Teleron Riyadh is affected after the last battle, right?
No.
We know the storm and chaos, but we have no idea what Teleron Riyadh looks like after the last battle. That would be something I'd be interested in seeing.
Yeah. So yeah, that was all a lot of food for thought. This was a rather long episode, but I think we had to do them together because
I think we did too.
There's just too much chewy future speculation and paradoxes of free will to split it up.
And just order and the way we took parts from the first chapter and put them with the second chapter and everything else like that. I think that was, and it wasn't no longer than some of our traditional episodes. We hit the 2-hour mark on recording, but that used to be really common already. Almost every episode was 2 hours when we did Jordan stuff.
I remember editing those.
You're like, yeah, me too. Not as many, but
Yeah, but yeah, no, this is a bit of a callback to that
Definitely.
bygone era.
I mean, in many ways, these chapters are a callback to some of the greatest writing. You know, I have to say that, right? These chapters in Jordan's books, right, in the Shadow Rising, is what I think makes the Shadow Rising one of the best books in the series, and what makes one of these scenes some of the best scenes written in fantasy novels of all time.
Yeah, I'm nodding, and Sanderson clearly is doing his best to echo that and to recreate that and to write his own bookend of that. And I mean, yeah, he's riffing off of, some of our favorite writing.
You know, does he pull it off perfectly? No, but I like what he's able to do with it. I think that it's still very good. It's not quite the mind-bending, mind-blowing, because it's a vision that changes, right? So in a lot of ways, it's like, okay, that was cool, but it's irrelevant.
Yeah, I do think this is some of Sanderson's strongest writing in terms of trying to imitate Jordan and be in Jordan's wake and really following the form. I think this is one of his strongest attempts at that. Although, yeah, it nothing can compete with Shadow Rising Jordan. There's nothing can.
Not even other Jordan.
Yeah, no, Shadow Rising Jordan is peak Jordan. But this was Sanderson took this attempt very seriously and was very thoughtful about it. And I think did a very good job with respect to how he did with all the other attempts. This has got to be top shelf of Sanderson doing his best Jordan impression.
Just thinking about Memory of Light and the way books are written. Oh my God, Memory of Light. I started digging into the number. There's so many POVs in every chapter of Memory of Light. There is one chapter in the entire books that has one POV in it. All the rest of them have 2, 3, 4, 5 or more POVs.
Good Lord.
So if we do 2 chapters of Memory of Light, we will be jumping. It's just so much jumping around between different POVs. I'm almost wondering if it's worth going through and doing a chunk of Perrin, I mean, it's not, because it's so broken up.
But it's that broken up that you're
that broken up. And we're like, holy crap, we are going to be skipping around 3, 4, 5 times every single chapter. If we do 2 chapters, we may have 6 or 7 POVs to cover.
Whew. Well, maybe we'll just have to do it as written, because otherwise it'll be too confusing.
I think so as well. And it's a narrower number of people, right? It's a lot of the big 5 plus, a couple of the characters. And I have not even tried to figure out how we're going to do the last battle chapter. That's going to be several episodes.
The 2 months of the last battle.
Yeah. No, actually, I was breaking up the chapters, and I got to the last battle chapter, and I just went, I don't even know. I'm going to have to read this to break it down and figure out how much.
Well, that's the chapter that is more pages than the entire Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a whole special subunit of the pod unto itself.
And then I'm kind of like, oh, well, if we're breaking that into so many other pieces, maybe we should do other chapters quicker. But then I'm like, oh my God, 3 chapters. We're talking up to 9 to 12 POVs in one episode. That's just a lot. It's just a lot. Yeah, I think we would definitely, just in the same way that we edited together
The Cleansing. Yeah, a supercut of the entire last battle will have to be an episode that gets released, even though we will have to create it and release it in chunks. Once we're done with it, yes, a supercut would make a lot of sense.
But I feel like we're going to have a very interesting time with this last book. It's going to be a very different rhythm than what we're used to.
Weird.
Yeah.
Weird.
But I think with that, I am done talking.
Yeah.
I just want to say a huge shout out to our patrons. We got the Patreon is changing what it's doing a little bit, where I guess it's charging people who subscribe for a whole year all at once.
Yeah, you can now do annual subscriptions. Patreon does a whole bunch of, it's cheaper, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I just clicked the buttons to let Patreon pitch y'all on that. But some of you did take the annual option. And yeah, over the weekend, it was like, wow, all these donations. And then I look at the fine print and it says, will be charged again in, April of 2027. It's like, oh, the annuals. Cool. So yeah, thanks everyone who decided to do an annual subscription. Patreon says that that's good for us. So thank you. That's been a thing for a while. Well, I don't pay attention to the platform where I make money, okay?
It's so funny. We just want it to keep working. And they keep offering more and more features to try and get you to use it as they want you to use Patreon as your platform. And it's that's not what we have other platforms. We're just using it as a donation center. And so sometimes we do not necessarily keep track of the most modern features on it.
Which, like, honestly, maybe we should, but I don't know.
We should be doing about it, yeah. But
yeah, for sure. That's a whole thing. But yeah, with that, I think we're done.
I think we're done
for the week.
Yep, for sure.
See y'all next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Please rate and review us on your podcast app, and consider supporting us on Patreon for ad-free episodes. What Spoilers is a production of Fox and Raven Media. For more podcasts from Fox and Raven Media, visit our website at foxandravenmedia.com.